Hello and welcome. Today let us discuss about the mountains. Mountains as a system. Let us see what are the impacts as far as the climate change is concerned, what are the risks and what are the adaptation options. The point is why we picked mountains as a specialized case to discuss in this class with respect to its impact, observed impacts, risk and adaptation options. It is really interesting to know that various different uh, in different places or in different continents we have the mountain systems in what do you say, placed across different width and breadth, and they offer different kind of specialized services to the people who are there in the mountains or inside the mountain regions or in the downstream. So in this context, it is really interesting to learn about the mountain as a system as far as the consequence they are facing with respect to climate change. So to understand this, we will go through these 6-7 points. The first one is what are the socio-ecological systems and climate change as far as the mountains are concerned. Then we'll understand the water resources. Why? Because mountains they often store a lot of water in terms of the glaciers or ice caps on top of this, and the population what they accommodate in a mountain system and its downstream. The third is we'll try to understand the observed changes, impacts and adaptation responses in mountains and how these mountain regions are affected by climate change. So the importantly how they are affected, and the people, infrastructure, they are at risk with respect to landslide and flood. So two events we'll consider. One is landslide, which is happening at a higher rate in terms of an extreme weather events these days because of the climate change, and the flood, particularly the floods which we are receiving these days with respect to what you say, climate change or alteration in terms of the precipitation, or you say the snowfall pattern. Together we put it precipitation, so rain and snow together. And then we'll talk about what are the various adaptation options we have and the transboundary governance factors. And let us see in terms of a socio-ecological systems and climate change, mountains lie at the intersection of accelerated warming and large populations that depend directly or indirectly on them. So it is important to understand the population which depend directly or indirectly on them due to the climate change impact. These regions, or you say the mountain regions, accommodate high biological and cultural diversity. So that is what we are putting in terms of socio-ecological systems. So they are the treasure of high level of biological and cultural diversity and provide vital goods and services to people living in and around the mountain regions and in downstream areas. As far as the schematic diagram is concerned, on the left hand side is the direct impact and the right hand side is the indirect impact, and the center circle, see, if you see, the mountain ecosystems provide vital services including water, forest, so carbon storage, carbon in terms of forest carbon, in terms of soil carbon, and also in terms of the carbon in the water, and also the cultural values. And as far as the direct impact is concerned, the precipitation changes in terms of drying up of the springs and erratic rainfall pattern or altered rainfall pattern, and such as cloud burst and other effects are the direct impacts that are realized because of the precipitation change. Now with respect to increasing higher weather. So because of rise in temperature, the weather is becoming hot or warmer, so it is prompting more and more wildfires in the mountain systems. And the indirect impacts are decreasing pollinator diversity and also the climate induced hazards such as landslides or floods. So people in and around mountain regions depend on these services and the services the mountain ecosystems offers for their livelihood, income generation, food, health and well-being. And in terms of the direct and indirect impact, all of these ecosystem services are affected. So altering habitat conditions. In terms of this, you can see the shortage of fodder, declining livestock population, decreasing regeneration potential that leads to threatening the native and the endemic species. So all of us know endemic species are the group of species that are specialized or they live in that particular area because of the characteristics are offered by that particular environment. Decreasing quality and quantity of ecosystem products. So the first one is poverty, food, nutrition and health insecurity, out migration and increase in area of fallow land. So these all lead to the poverty. The third is delineation of mountain regions, population densities in 2015. The next what we have been seeing is the climate impacts. The climate impacts on in terms of the mountains and their attribution to human influence have increased in recent decades with a lot of observations or you can say serious consequences for people and ecosystem in many of these mountain regions. Take a look at the depiction of the various mountain systems in terms of the upper round depictions across all these 6 mountainous areas. In terms of North America, there are about 5.42 million square kilometer of the area is there in terms of the mountain area in North America, where within this about 63.75 million of people they live over these areas. In terms of Europe, in Europe the mountainous area is about 2.27 million square kilometer that accommodates about 115.85 million population. Coming to Asia, over 15.92 million square kilometer area, it accommodates about 720 million people. Coming to Australasia, the figure is still very less. Over a mountainous region of just you can say 0.38 million square kilometer, only 0.53 million people or population reside. As far as the Africa is there, you have about 3.85 million square kilometer area, over which 227.3 million population reside. This is the figure as far as the 2015 is concerned, and going to the Central and South America, over an area of 3.58 million square kilometer, about 138.26 million people they reside. So this says that over the mountainous region there are a lot of people they reside. Now coming to the color coding in terms of the various colors starting from the yellow to red. So when you move from the population density in terms of mountainous area, it shows that how the extreme red or the red one is the higher population of more than 10 people per square kilometer, and the yellow one is the thin one which talks about less than 1. So this picture or this diagram tells us that across different continents how is the population thickness or density over different areas of mountainous system. With respect to the observed changes, their impacts and adaptation responses in mountains. The spatial distribution of many of these plants have shifted to higher elevation. We have been studying from here and there that the species have shifted to higher elevation because the higher elevations are now receiving the same amount of temperature and other environmental conditions that earlier was not available. So if that habitat is becoming suitable from temperature and other purposes, then perhaps the species is moving to that place or that region. Climate and cryosphere change have negatively impacted the water cycle in mountains, including variable timing of glacier melt and snow melt stream discharge. These changes have variable impacts of water availability for people and economies, contributing to increasing tensions or conflicts over water resources, especially in the seasonal dry regions. So, what happens? These climate change driven changes in precipitation, river flow regimes, and landslide, they all affect the production and use of energy. So, energy system in terms of the mountainous region is affected, particularly the hydropower. The observed climate driven impacts on mountain ecosystem services, agriculture and pastoralism are largely negative in most of the mountain regions. Having a look at the importance of mountain water resources for lowland areas and populations, you see the importance of mountain regions for lowland water resources with respect to 2041 to 2050 and the SSP scenario of RCP 6.0 and SSP 2 to RCP 6.0 and this talks about the extent of the importance and the dependence by the population in terms of the lowland areas. Have a look at our system in terms of the Himalayan system, lot of red. So that red talks about essential but varsity is insufficient as far as the extent of importance and dependence is concerned, whereas the cyan or blue color they talk about supportive and minor in terms of the extent of importance and dependence level as far as the population concerned in the mountain water resources. While contributing to poverty reduction, in some mountain regions there is limited evidence of adaptations effectively contributing to the remediation of underlying social determinants of vulnerability such as gender and ethnicity. Observed changes in seasonal, particularly time and extent, are negatively affecting the mountain winter tourism, and recreation and variability affect the tourism activities in other seasons as well. So, what happens in terms of these climate related hazards such as flash floods and landslides? They have contributed to an increase in disasters affecting a growing number of people in mountain regions and area further downstream. So, taking the case of our example of the flash floods and landslides, we have seen a lot of people downstream are getting affected by these extreme weather events or the disasters. Adaptation responses to climate driven impacts in mountain regions vary significantly in terms of goals and priorities, scope, depth, and speed of implementation. So, the governance of modes of decision making and extent of financial and other resources to implement them. To take a look at the detection and attribution of observed impacts of anthropogenic climate change in terms of the mountain regions. So, on the y-axis, the different attributions are with respect to water system, with respect to the cryosphere, with respect to the terrestrial ecosystem, with respect to the agricultural and livestock population, the tourism, migration, health and human being livelihood or life, and then disaster and community change in terms of the cultural values. So, all these attributes have been observed to have been affected because of this anthropogenic induced climate change in the mountainous region. So now how? So how these mountain regions are affected by climate change? The point is, how is the fresh water? Let us take a look out at these questions which have been put in terms of question form, and they are, the first one is, how is the fresh water from mountain regions affected by climate change? So fresh water from mountain regions affected by climate change, and what are the consequences of people and ecosystems? So the point is, the answer is, sources from fresh water from mountains such as rainfall, snow or glacier melt and groundwater are strongly affected by climate change. So this is because of strongly affected by climate change, this lead to important changes in the water supply in terms of quantity, partly or quality, and the timing. So all three, quantity, partly or fully, and then quality and also the timing. So in terms of timing means shift in the seasonality. So in many cases, the effect of ecosystems and people are negative. So this is actually negatively impacting the people downstream or within the within the mountainous region. This in turn lead to creation of exacerbation of the ecosystem degradation, water scarcity, and competition or conflict over the water downstream. So three important things. Because of this, the quality, quantity, and the timing of water discharge or water supply downstream is affected. Now let's move to the next question in terms of, do the people in mountain regions and further downstream face more severe risk to water related disasters due to climate change, and if it is, how are they coping with this? The mountain regions have always been affected by either too much or too little of water. Because of climate change, hazards are changing rapidly, becoming even more unpredictable. Whether or not these changes will result in more disasters locally and further downstream, they depend on several factors, particularly not least the fact that more people are setting in exposed locations. People in mountains have a history of developing skills to live in a dangerous and dynamic environment, which will be invaluable in future when combined with inclusive and long-term risk reduction measures. So the point is, more disasters locally and further downstream, they depend on several factors. So this is actually leading to a lot of exposure in terms of the settling or the settlement locations. So that is why the history of these mountain people moving in terms of living and in terms of a dangerous and dynamic environment, they often move to cope up with this. So let us see with respect to the landslide and floods. This particular depiction, you see for three different scenarios. One is 1.3 to 1.7 degrees centigrade in terms of the people and infrastructure in mountainous regions at risk from the landslides and floods point of view. So first scenario in terms of 1.3 to 1.7 degrees centigrade. Then the second one, the middle one in all cases is between 2 to 2.5 degrees centigrade, and the fourth one is around 4 degrees centigrade. And different colors talk about moderate, high, and very high over different mountainous regions. So the risk, if you have a look at the Himalayan, the risks are very high and alarming. The eastern, the Tibetan plateau, and also the south side of this. So all three, so whole of the Himalaya is at a very high risk as far as the landslide and floods are concerned with respect to the others. Now let us look at the projected impacts, key risks and limits to adaptation efforts in terms of the mountainous region. Increasing temperatures will continue to induce changes in mountain regions throughout the 21st century, with expected negative consequences for mountain cryosphere, biodiversity, ecosystem services, and human being. So it has been projected because temperature will rise, and by end of 21st century or throughout 21st century, there will be negative consequence. The cryosphere will be affected, the biodiversity, whole of the flora fauna will be affected, the various ecosystem services in this region will be affected, so as the human well-being. The projected changes in hazards such as floods, landslides, as well as changes in water cycle, thus we have seen, will lead to severe consequences for people, their infrastructure, and thereby the economy. So people, infrastructure, and economy will be affected. There is an increasing risk of local and global species extinctions, where species are not able to move to higher elevations or other cooler locations, with risks from extreme events such as wildfire potentially exacerbating those risks. So climate change is projected to lead to profound changes and irreversible losses in mountain regions, with negative consequences in terms of life and cultural identity. Now let us move on to the adaptation options. This graphs talks about 4 points. The first is promote water harvesting and particularly multi-purpose projects for disaster risk management. So what kind of water you harvesting? You harvest in terms of the rooftop and the rainwater. The second is promote conservation of native flora and fauna and the habitat restoration as far as the diversity is concerned. Third is promote agroforestry practices, and fourth is promote the mountain products in terms of the wild edible medicinal plants, cash crops, and ecotourism. So 4 very, very important adaptation options are, which would take care of the people, the economy, and also the infrastructure or their livelihood. So this helps in terms of, this would help for this you require adaptation options are, you educate and build awareness with as much as people living in the mountain region. The crop diversification and crop change. So encourage for diversification of the crops or the changing of the crops as far as to adapt to the new situation. What are the new situation? The new situation is you have less supply, both quality and quantity of water supply will be altered, and also the timing will be altered. So when in a situation where less of the water supply is there, then we need to go for change of crop that would adapt to lesser requirement of water. So then help the species to adapt and protect in refugia. So a lot of species which are there in the downstream or at one location, that will move to the other, and few will not. So if they cannot move, then it may perish. It may extinct from the nature in totality. So we need to create refugia to protect them. And then restoration of degraded land and wasteland. A lot of land and wastelands will be created, and they need to be protected, or they need to be restored properly. So these are the adaptation options. So I'll talk them quickly in terms of water harvesting structures promotion, native flora conservation, flora and fauna conservation, agroforestry practices promotion, and consumption of mountain products with respect to wild edible and medicinal. And how to cope up with this? We have to promote in terms of our education and awareness, the changes in the crop pattern or crop diversification, and assisted migration and protection in terms of the refugia, and also restoration of the degraded and wastelands. Now, what are the options? Same in terms of the options for future adaptation and climate resilient sustainable development in mountains. The current pace, depth and scope of adaptations are insufficient to address future risks in mountain regions, particularly at higher levels. So, whatever we are doing currently, perhaps they are insufficient. The current scope of adaptation measures perhaps are insufficient to match with the adaptation what is required for mountain region. So, adaptation, decision making processes that engage with and incorporate people's concern and values and address multiple risks are more robust. So, what is needed? What is needed is whatever adaptation measures are proposed in terms of decision making processes, they should incorporate the people who are living in this region, the value of this region, or you say the ethnicity, the culture has to be also respected in the adaptation measures or while planning the adaptation measures. Then only a more robust and what you say people friendly, nature friendly adaptation option can be promoted, and so that it will overcome the risks. So, with warming of above 1.5 degrees centigrade, the need for adaptation to address key risks in mountainous become increasingly urgent. So, look at the depiction in terms of the extent of adaptation observed in mountainous region. So, on the left hand side you have three things: depth, scope and the speed. And on the upper side, the mountain system as far as the Africa, Asia, Australasia, Central and South America, North America, Europe and the global mountain in terms of the average. So, let us see the example from the Asia. So, Asian region, if you see, the level of adaptation extent is relatively less, whereas if you see with respect to the speed of the adaptation measures in terms of Australasia is very high. In terms of the scope, also Asia is relatively lesser than that of Australia, or means it is for all other regions also it has to be increased, and the depth also is relatively less with that of compared to that of the Central and South America and also the North America. So, in terms of the dimensions and adaptation extent with respect to speed, scope and depth, the extent of adaptation measures across the mountainous regions says or indicates that we need to work more, or we need to work better, so that we will come out with a sustainable or climate resilient sustainable development in the mountain systems. Now, another three questions that in terms of the adaptation options and transboundary governance. So, the first question is, does climate change pose a risk to mountain species and ecosystems, and will this affect people? Yes, the mountain system and the species and ecosystems that are present in a mountain system, it is posed, or climate change poses a risk to this ecosystem and including the species, and definitely it will affect affect the people. So, tree line positioning, that means where the tree if you go up in a mountainous region, then more than 4,500 meter beyond or above 4.5, it depends, it varies. So, the tree cover will disappear or will stop. So, we call that as the tree line. Then after you get some of the bushes, shrubs and herbs, then finally the green cover is off. So, tree line position in terms of bioclimatic zones and species ranges move up in elevation as the climate warms. So, thereby it increases the risk of extinction for species isolated on mountain tops as a result of exceeding their physiological limit, loss of habitat, or you say the competition from colonizing species. So, additionally, climate change may alter the quality and quantity of food and natural products on which the livelihood of many mountain communities depends. Second is, what are the types of adaptation options are feasible to address impacts of climate change in mountain regions under different levels of warming, and what are their limits? Yes, this is important to know that what are the options we have and what are their limits and which one is suitable at what level of warming. So, the feasibility of adaptation to address risk in mountain regions is influenced by various factors, many of which are unique to that particular mountain or people and the environment which surrounds it. So, the adaptation options in mountains mainly consist of small and largely autonomous steps. Particularly, the robust and flexible adaptation measures have a better chance of addressing to risk. But eventually, large systematic transformation will be needed in the face of higher level of warming. So, what happens? Robust and flexible adaptation measures have a better chance to address the risk. So, if it is robust, then whatever the level of this warming is, it will adapt. But if it is very high, then we need a very specialized things to address to the higher level of warming. So, there are empirical evidence on what works and what doesn't is largely absent but urgently needed. Very important point. We need to understand that what is suitable where. So, this kind of empirical relationship, that if this is the label, then this is the adaptation option and vice versa. So, this kind of empirical evidence is still missing, but it needs to be developed urgently. It is needed urgently. The last point is, the question is, why are the regional cooperation and transboundary governance needed for sustainable mountain development? Friends, in terms of the regional cooperation and transboundary governance, see, this mountain system do not fall under one, one country boundary. In terms of the political boundary of the country, the mountain system doesn't fall within. So, it is beyond one country's political boundary. So, there the transboundary approach is important. So, regional cooperation and transboundary governance are key to managing our vast mountain resources because they do not necessarily share the political boundary. So, mountain countries need to come together. So, there has to be cooperation among and between the mountain countries. They need to come together, share the data and information for joint management. So, jointly also that should develop the policies and take the decision that benefit all countries equitably. So, it is a joint management is required. A lack of cooperation may lead to missed opportunities to address climate risk and adequately manage mountain resources, which could cause social unrest and spark conflict within and between the countries. So, these are the issues as far as the transboundary governance is concerned, and this is really needed. And for this, the only solution is the countries which fall under the judicial boundary or the boundary of this mountain region should work together to defeat the impact of climate change. So, the cross chapter number 5 on mountains has been picked for this discussion in this class, and we discuss all these 6 points. Thank you very much, and with this we have completed the 5th week's discussion on climate change impacts, risk and adaptation options. Next, in the 6th week, we are going to talk about the various mitigation options we have as far as these risk and impacts are concerned. So, for that we will be taking help of the working group 3 report as far as the ARR, the assessment report 6 is concerned. Thank you very much.